Hello BookTube, it's Joshua here, and today I'm going to be doing a reading update. Just this morning I posted a Poetry Thursday video, but I feel like I really need to do something more substantial on this channel, because I guess I've been kind of busy this September, and I've just been doing very small things like book hauls or just that Poetry Thursday video. So yeah, I'm gonna do this reading update. I haven't done a reading update in about 3 months, but I'm not going to go all the way back to August or anything. I'm just going to talk about what I read in September. So yeah, I have some physical books here. I'll talk about some ebooks as well. The very first book that I want to show you is Beowulf, translated by Seamus Heaney. I did a buddy read of this with Denson at the channel Robin Song Reads. And it was so much fun. It was a really wonderful buddy read. Um, yeah, I mean, I feel like this book, I've really connected with this book. I feel like so many of its themes and just the general atmosphere of it has stayed with me, at least since I finished reading it. It has really stayed with me, and it feels very vivid in my memory, um, solely because I've been talking about it so much. Like I feel like maybe doing a buddy read has that effect. Maybe cements some of the themes in one's mind, and yeah, I'm very glad for that because this poem is amazing. I mean, Seamus Heaney does such an excellent job with the translation. It really feels like an original poem in its own right. I mean, Heaney is so skilled. Um, and yeah, I think like one of the things that me and Denson talked about was how sorrowful the poem is. Um, I mean, there are obviously a lot of very heroic action scenes, and those are very fun to read. But I think Seamus Heaney's tone and as well as so many um, moments in the poem are just incredibly sorrowful and sad, and I think that part stuck with me a lot more a lot more than the heroics. And yeah, I mean, what else can I say? I haven't really. I read one prose translation of this, and it was more of me skimming it. I didn't really connect with it on this level before, but now I love this poem. Now I'm so happy that I read this. It was such a great buddy read. And if Denson's watching this, if you're watching this, thank you so much for reading it with me. Um, okay, next. Next is a Kindle, and I actually read this one for school, and it was an incredible read. This was The Bluest by Toni Morrison. So this was my very first Toni Morrison novel. I've never read anything by her before, and I was very pleasantly. My reaction was incredibly positive. Um, I guess I'll talk a bit about the plot. It centers around this little girl named Piccola, and the novel largely takes place within a black community in Ohio, and we see Piccola mainly through the eyes of other characters, and we see each one essentially just treat her horribly, and I think Morrison is trying to show us why they've been treating her horribly. Why, um, I think she's trying to show us how cruelty can be passed down. The themes deal a lot with race and racism, um, and it's kind of shown how the racism that's shown to black people in general in 1940s America, which is when this novel takes place, the racism that is shown to them kind of gets passed down from generation to generation, and it gets passed down just it gets passed down the food chain, so to speak, so that Piccola, who is a little black girl, is the one who ends up um, getting treated the worst out of everyone else. If that makes sense, I don't think I've expressed that very well, but we essentially see that happen until essentially. Well, this is kind of a spoiler, but I don't think like there aren't any major plot twists. You kind of see it. You can kind of see it coming until at the end, Piccola, she gets raped and loses the baby and then goes mad. Um, and so it's an incredibly grim novel, incredibly heavy, and it's just Morrison trying to show us that vision. Um, I do think that there are some weak moments in the novel. Like sometimes, as Morrison is writing, you kind of just get the feeling that she's just creating this solely to prove that point, solely to show how, um, how racism can be passed down even within even within the Black community itself. And so sometimes in that sense it can feel a little bit artificial, but I only got that feeling a couple times. And there were also a couple moments where I thought, well, I was looking at there was some dialogue and I just thought this seems very pointless. Only a few moments of that. Other than that, it was incredibly well written. I really want to read more by Morrison. I believe this was her first novel, so it's a great place to start if I want to read through her chronologically at some point. But yeah, that's The Blue Sky by Toni Morrison. Next up, I read two nature books, both by the same author. I read One Day at Teton Marsh and One Day on Beetle Rock by Sally Cargar. And these were really amazing reads. I heard about it on Steve's channel. I think he was just doing a kind of reading, like a daily reading update or something like that. And he mentioned, oh no, I think it was Shorty September that he was doing it for. And he mentioned Sally Cargar and said how, and talked about how she's kind of neglected now in terms of nature writers. And I've been meaning to read more nature books. So I just went on Kindle and read one book by her. At first I read One Day at Teton Marsh, and it was so wonderful. She does this, Cargar does this thing where she takes, she looks at one single ecosystem in One Day at Teton Marsh. That ecosystem is a pond, and then she dedicates a single chapter to each animal in it, and kind of gives not necessarily a personality, but she gives a story to each animal. I think you could accuse her of anthropomorphization, but I would defend Karagar against that notion, because I think she's only anthropomorphizing in the sense that she's trying to make these animals' actions intelligible to humans, and so she's trying to, well, fictionalize these stories of the animals in a way that is artistic. But in terms of the science of it, in terms of like, she obviously knows a lot about animals. She obviously knows that these animals are very. She honestly knows how these animals act, and that's there too. So you're not only getting really beautiful and at times moving stories about the animals in this ecosystem, but you're also learning about them scientifically, at least to a certain extent. And that holds true for both of the books. Of course, with the mention of One Day in the title, that gives you a clue into how it's structured, with each chapter focusing on the individual animal. She recounts the exact same day, and so it goes from morning to evening for every single animal. And oftentimes it's really wonderful how this works. Oftentimes their paths cross each other. So in a chapter about a moose, you'll see the moose will be kind of upset, and then it will attack the beaver, the beaver's dam. And then in the beaver chapter, you'll get the beaver's perspective, where he's running away from the moose. And it's just very delightful to see the interconnectedness of all these different stories. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. I hope I'll read more of Sally Cargar sometime in the future, as well as more nature books in general. I have Ages for Hawk and a Pilgrim at Tinker Creek on my shelf. On my shelf. So I should have no lack of nature books to read in the future. Next up is The Canon by CP Cavafy. So I found this. I think I hauled this. No, I don't think I showed it in any book haul, but I got it recently, and I just immediately started reading it and really liked what I saw. this edition is translated by Stratis Javiaris. And so if you don't know who CP Cavafy is, he's a modern Greek poet. He lived in the end of the 19th century and the early 20th century. I believe he was born 1860 something, and then he died 1933, around there. And his content, the content of his poems is incredibly interesting. A lot of his early poems, well, all of his poems, one common theme running throughout his poems is an interest in history. He oftentimes writes about historical characters, especially within the ancient world, so ancient Greece or ancient Rome, or even more so in the Byzantine Empire. Oftentimes he'll evoke very lesser known figures, so that I really had to rely on the notes at the back of this book here. But once you read the notes, it's completely intelligible. His poetry doesn't follow that modern tendency of alluding to something without clarifying the illusion, without still having it make sense. So yeah, he'll often go back into history and reenact a scene from history, and he'll often find these ironies within history. He'll show a character, some historical personage who is incredibly ambitious, for example, who wants to achieve this or that, but then he kind of also shows our own perspective of historical hindsight, which makes that historical personage's ambition incredibly ironic. He does a lot of that. You could say that that's one category of his poetry. The other category is love poetry. He wrote very intensely homoerotic poems. I don't know whether he was the first one to do that. I mean, surely it was. I'm sure there were some precursors at some point throughout history, but yeah, he wrote very, very intensely sexual poems. A lot of it is about having romances that end, and then that the lover can look back at after much time has gone by and see in a different light, and actually turn into art, into poetry, which is really amazing. When I was reading those poems, I was kind of reminded of James Merrill, because he did exactly that. He lived what CP Cavafy was talking about, because James Merrill wrote a lot of love poetry as well, but he was a lot more autobiographical than CP Cavafy. Merrill would take one of his own real-world romances and make art out of it, really incredibly beautiful and sophisticated art. And so yeah, actually I think James Merrill definitely read CP Cavafy, because he named a number of his poems days of 1964, for example, or something like that, and that's taking a title directly from CP Cavafy, because CP Cavafy also wrote poems that were titled days of 1924 or something like that. I can't remember the dates, but yeah. So there's that. Cavafy has those two categories of poems, although they're really both, they share the fascination with looking back in time, as I would say. I'm really looking forward to discovering more about. I'm really looking forward to reading more of CP Cavafy, especially in the different translation, because this translation by Stratis Javiaris was not good at all. It was really not good. Just you could tell that he was trying to create, to have his translations take on a poetic form, but it felt so half-assed. It just didn't. It was so awkward and so so bad. It was just really bad. Even then though, the content of the poems really fascinated me, but I really want to read a different translation and see if there are some better translators out there who can give me new insights into the poetry, and allow me to connect with it on an even deeper level. That's CP Cavafy. Next up, now I'm gonna talk about the books that I'm currently reading, that I'm currently making my way through. Excuse me. Um, I'm reading a series, a graphic novel series called Earth Before Us. And this is kind of a middle grade middle grade or YA graphic novel, um, where there's a little girl. I can't remember her name. I'm really bad with character names, but there's a little girl who just failed her test on dinosaurs, and she's kind of upset. She got a zero, and she goes, "Oh my god, I don't know what I'm gonna do." And then she walks by her neighbor's house, Miss Lernan, and Miss Lernan is a paleontologist, an ex-paleontologist, who, and she has a very eccentric personality, shall we say. And Miss Lernan sees that the little girl needs to learn about dinosaurs. She actually, Miss Lernan, when you see her in the first time that you're introduced to her in the graphic novel, she pops out of a recycling bin and starts talking to the girl. So that might give you a clue into the somewhat whimsical nature of Miss Lernan. But she takes the girl time traveling all the way back to the Mesozoic era and teaches her about dinosaurs. And it's delightful. It's just charming. I don't know. Before I read this, I didn't know anything about dinosaurs. I don't think I ever learned about it in school. I never read any books about it. So this, even though I'm 20, this was an introduction. This was my introduction to dinosaurs as well. Um, so yeah, it was, especially the character of Miss Lernan was so charming and delightful. Um, yeah, I would highly recommend it. It just makes me it makes me smile. And so there's actually three parts of this series. The first is Dinosaur Empire, where Miss Lernan shows a little girl about dinosaurs. And then now I'm working my way through the second one, which is called Ocean Renegades. And then there's a third one. I think it's called Mammal Takeover. And yeah, I'm really enjoying it and learning a lot. So, um, next up, slight change of tone. This is a Hitler biography. This is Ian Kershaw's Hitler, Hubris, 1889 to 1936. Sorry about the glare on this book. I'll try to hold it so that it's not shining. But yeah, I'm about 200 pages in, I think. Yeah, I'm making my way through it at a fairly slow pace, just because I'm also reading other things alongside it, like the Earth Before Us series and Sally Cargar. I all read alongside this. Um, but yeah, this is only my second book on Nazi history. The first was The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich by William L. Shirer, and it's very interesting to compare these two historians, Ian Kershaw and William L. Shirer, because they're very different. Shirer was a brilliant writer, and the attitude that he took towards his subject matter was an incredibly angry one. You can feel the outrage on the pages, um, and yeah, but he still does a brilliant job. Whereas with Kershaw, the tone is a lot more objective, a lot more just taking a complete step back and just looking at the events. And I believe there's a quote here. Yes. Um, every page is focused on the historical question we would prefer to forget. How did it happen? So that question, how did it happen? That seems to be kind of the underlying question that is running through all these pages. And I think that Kershaw's more objective tone helps with that. Kershaw writes in a really wonderfully sophisticated and dense way. Dense in the sense that he packs so much information into his sentences, and yet it doesn't feel. Um, what would the word be? It doesn't. It's still intensely readable. It's still accessible, even though he packs all that information into it, which is just what I wanted. Um, so yeah. What else can I say? There's this really wonderful feeling of I guess being in a dialogue with other histories, because this is only the first part of the 2-volume biography, and so I think this is supposed to be a very authoritative biography, and so Kershaw is really going into the tiny little fine details of Hitler's life, and trying to establish what the actual historical reality was. And so this means that he's looking at what a lot of earlier historians have assumed about Hitler and about the subject, and he's at least saying what he thinks. He's trying to dispel with any of the myths about Hitler, and he's taking a really balanced, really objective, really scrutinizing look at what the facts were, and I'm finding it immensely fascinating. It's so good. I'm happy that I'm reading this. It's really good. And so that is the progress that I've made so far. I guess I'll tell you where I am. So I'm 200 pages in. I'm in the chapter called The Drummer, and so this is just when Hitler has now become the leader, the dictator of his own party, and he's become known within Bavarian politics, and maybe a little bit known within Weimar politics as well, but nothing really beyond that. Most people wouldn't be able to imagine him becoming the dictator of Germany, except for his devoted acolytes, except for the few people who are very close to him and who worship him. And so that's where I am right now. I didn't realize that at this time his party, which was called the NSDAP, I didn't realize that it was just one among many like pan-German far right parties within Germany, and especially within Bavaria. And I also didn't realize that organizations like the SA were actually technically a part of a larger a larger paramilitary organization led not by Hitler, but by people like Ernst Röhm, and other higher up individuals. It's interesting seeing that, because I don't think Shara really talked about that. So I'm learning a lot. And I'm fascinated. And I think that's pretty much it. Yeah. So yes. That's pretty much it. I hope you guys enjoyed. I also wanted to apologize more fully this time, because I mentioned that I was going to make a little an art montage for Framed in September, and I've gotten through about 80% of it. I have like 2/3 of the video made with music and voiceover, but I have this third part, and I just can't seem to bring myself to work on it. I'm just procrastinating. I don't know what to say, and now that September's over, I don't know what I'm gonna do. So I'm sorry about that. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video at least. Thank you, BookTube, and goodbye. Oh, good girl. Oh, hey, sweetie. Hey. Oh.